listening to the Betmaker Show. This is the NFL Week 4 preview for Monday, September 23rd, 2019. And now, live from Las Vegas, the host of the Betmaker Show, Brian Blessing.
All right, this will be fun. Bruce Marshall from the Gold Sheet joins us. Brian Blessing. We're in Las Vegas. We're looking ahead to week 4 in the NFL. But to look ahead, it's best we look behind to try to formulate some ideas with the numbers that have been presented us. And I would think, Bruce, maybe to that end, and we had talked to Jack in a previous segment, our good friend, the head odds maker at Bookmaker, about the week 4 lines. When sometimes things just fall through the cracks. Philadelphia, that game against Atlanta, they got beat up. I mean, literally beat up. And we talked about it ad nauseum throughout the course of the week. And then people are like, and it's a goofy thing. And yeah, the Lions had a kick return and all these crazy things that happen in the game. But there are things that happen that it's like low-hanging fruit. That was a mash unit that took the football field yesterday, yet people aren't willing to give stuff like that credence. I mean, they're still human beings, and there are intangible things, power ratings be damned, that make a difference.
Yeah, there are. And for the Eagles in particular, now their receiving core is depleted. And they've got, Deshaun Jackson hurting, Alshon Jeffrey hurting. I teased in the Gold Sheet that Howie Roseman, the GM, might have to give a call to Harold Carmichael or Mike Quick. They're suggesting that sort of stuff on WIP in Philadelphia now. It's getting so crazy back there when they lose. But you're right. But to me, the other thing, Brian, is how the backup quarterbacks, for the most part, the ones that stepped in there did awfully well. And in many cases, it proved an upgrade, certainly with the Giants. And I know we'll probably talk about that in a minute. And Carolina, definitely, I think, at least Cam in his current condition, Kyle Allen was an upgrade. The Saints held the fort with Teddy Bridgewater in there. And Mason Rudolph has not been Roethlisberger, but he's not helpless there. He had a couple of long touchdown passes and had the Steelers in position to win that game yesterday. So some of these backup quarterbacks, that's the other thing for me that jumped off the page. Some of them are not that bad, and in some cases, actually maybe an upgrade.
Well, let's right out of the gate. I would extend the Atlanta situation for the Eagles. Then they play and they lose to the Lions, and the schedule maker does them no favors. If this is still a very good football team, but now they get the short work week and go to Green Bay. Is this a kind of a tsunami wave of problems for the Eagles in the short term?
Yeah, it could be. It could be. And this is a tough test, having to go to Green Bay where kind of quietly, the Packers are 3-0. Usually when Green Bay's 3-0, it'd be a front page headline. But now with all the stuff in, Dallas and Antonio Brown and everything else, the Packers seem to be getting pushed back. But keep in mind a couple of things here what Green Bay has done here. Very quietly in the offseason, they made the coaching change, which we all knew about. But I think the real upgrade has happened on the defensive side, especially adding Preston and Zadarius Smith. Now, they dished out a lot of money to sign these guys to become edge pass rushers, and that was a little bit of a controversy in Green Bay because one of the guys they let loose was Clay Matthews, who had been there for so long, and now he's playing for the Rams. Anyway, the new Smith boys, Preston and Zadarius, through 3 games combined, 7.5 sacks, and Clay Matthews and Nick Perry, the guys who were there last year before them, only 5 sacks combined, all of 2018. So that's worked out. And this Green Bay defense is sort of a story right now because they're playing much better. They were in Joe Flacco's face again yesterday, and it's making it easier for Aaron Rodgers to slowly work into this new Matt LaFleur offense. Green Bay is very interesting, and all of a sudden, I think the NFC North is one of the most interesting divisions in the NFL.
Oh, boy. I'm going to say this out loud. And, Bruce, I mean, if you want, play the game of whack-a-mole, get the big mallet out, hit me over the head. If this Chargers number, 16.5, if it goes to 17, I'm telling you, the best bet on the card next week's Miami. It's an NFL team. They're 0-3 against the spread. We talked to Jack. Listen, the bookmakers are not going to let Miami go 0-16 straight up. They could care less about that. But they're not going to let them go 0-16 against the spread. At the end of the day, they'll adjust this, and the goal is to be 8-8. ATS, and you got the Chargers. I mean, the worst thing that happened to Miami is the Chargers are coming off a loss, but it's a West Coast team traveling cross country, playing a breakfast football game, and Rosen gets a game under his belt. That number's too big, if you ask me.
Yeah, they're daring us to take Miami here, and the Dolphins are going to cover a number one of these weeks. If we can pick the week, it could be this week. But we saw something a little different from them. They were in that game into the third quarter, and they could have had the lead at halftime. There had Kenyon Drake not fumbled. Now it's still a pretty fragile situation, but you saw some green shoots on the horizon there, on the landscape there, at least, because Rosen gives them a little chance to make something happen. No team can be as bad as the Dolphins looked the first 2 weeks, and that was a better effort yesterday. And I'd caution, and long ago, because our memory banks go back a long way, you and me, Brian, but I can remember a team starting really bad in 73, which was the Saints, and Archie was still there. And that was that game they were talking about an opening week that was even worse than Miami's loss. The Saints lost 62-7 to Atlanta in the opening game of 73. But they started to cover numbers a few weeks later, and they became a very competent outfit. So sometimes the first couple weeks, are a little bit of a curveball thrown here, and things change. And you're right. I'd watch the Dolphins starting to maybe, as soon as they're going to cover one of these games, and it could be this week.
That Saints team you talk about, basically in the huddle, Manning said, okay, you guys, wide receivers, just go run around, because I'm going to be back here running around for about 14 seconds, running for my life, and one of you better get open eventually.
That's right. That was a Saints team coached by John North, and they ended up 5-9 that year, but they beat some teams at home. They weren't, and they ended up being okay. But the thing was, it was a different team after the first couple of weeks when they got battered. Maybe that's going to work for the Dolphins. I'm not sure, but I agree with you that they're daring us to take the Dolphins, and one of these weeks they're going to cover a number.
All right, Oakland and Indy 6.5, and the total's 44.5. I'm thinking zigzag a little bit here. I'm a little leery because we got our first look at the Raiders on the road, and Minnesota ran it right down their throat. And I think the Colts have been a nice story. It's a good football team. They've survived luck to compete. They're 2-1. Things are kind of lovey-dovey. I think Oakland's got a stone in their shoe because they got manhandled, and I think guys are getting called out a little bit. The difference being here, Bruce, Indy does not have the running game Minnesota does. I do think that number is a little high.
It might be, but Indy's not bad. And
oh, no, they're good.
Yeah, and what they've got that Minnesota, and I think I take Jacoby Brissett over Cousins right now. Brissett came out of the box yesterday and completed, and this is their home opener, and he completed his first 16 passes, ended up throwing for over 300 yards, a couple of TDs, and they beat a dangerous Atlanta team. This team has got a physical offensive line there. So if the Raiders, I mean, they don't have a back quite like Dalvin Cook, but they're going to be able, they run the ball too. And the defense is pretty solid. Here's a couple of notes about Oakland though, before getting too aggressive with the Raiders. They've only covered twice on the road, their last 16 away. And with the schedule the Raiders have coming up here, that's something we got to think about because they are on the road. There's going to be a 7-week gap between their games at the Coliseum. And after this game at Indianapolis, they're going straight to London for their next game. They're not even coming back to the West Coast. This is a schedule that I joked in the Gold Sheet that maybe there might be some holdovers from the Pete Rozelle era in the NFL scheduling office wishing to punish the Raiders for past transgressions because, as you know, Al Davis and Rozelle were not the best of friends. So the schedule bothers me, and the fact they can't play on the road. And we'll see about the Raiders, but I think this is a crucial one. This season starts to slip away from them, Brian, if they don't win this week. So you're right; it may be a last stand, circle the wagons effort at Lucas Oil.
The next two games are eerily similar, but I think they're markedly different, if that makes sense. And that would be Kansas City laying 7 on the road at Detroit, and New England 7.5 on the road at Buffalo. I think Kansas City should be 7.5 and New England should be 7. Kansas City, it's a video game offense. Give the Lions full marks, Bruce. 2-0-1, and they caught an Eagles team that was beat up and smoke and mirrors the week before, maybe even smoke and mirrors with kick returns and goofy things that happened in the Eagles game. It doesn't matter. Good for them. They're 2-0-1. I think the fun stops here.
Yeah, and I agree. And Kansas City might just be on a different plane. You know, we saw the Ravens actually. Most people covered with the Ravens yesterday, unless you bet it really late and that thing dropped to 4.5. So they came in the back door late. But for the most part in that game, the Chiefs looked like they were outclassing Baltimore. And to stick with all these weapons that Patrick Mahomes has, and we've talked about him before, Mecole Hardman, the rookie from Georgia. He looks like Tyreek Hill, and yesterday an 83-yard touchdown catch from Mahomes to really stretch that lead against the Ravens. Even if LaShawn McCoy is hurting, which he may have re-injured the ankle yesterday, they've got other backs who just keep being plugged in. And there's one other note. It's still early enough in the season. Andy Reid's team's notorious, especially his Kansas City teams, for playing their best football at the beginning of the season. Into this year, in weeks 1 through 5, the past 2 years, the Chiefs had covered every point spread. And this year, they covered their first 2. A few people, if you bet it late, covered it yesterday, but they won the game again. The bottom line is they start quick, and we're still in that window where the Chiefs are off to a quick early start. So just go with them, I think, until further notice.
Other than the impact it's had on my fantasy football team, the Tyreek Hill injury may be the best thing that ever happened to Kansas City because he will come back. But these other guys now are electric out there and flying all over the place. The depth is nuts. The one cautionary tale I throw out, and believe me, I'm not wishing injury on anybody, but in these games, teams are coming after Mahomes. And he's a competitor. The stuff he can do on the run. But I will say this, Bruce, I'd be watching this closely. It's 3 weeks. Mahomes is taking some hellacious shots. I mean, to the point where in every game, I'm like, is he getting up? Or is he going to be able to stay in the game? I would just watch that because he has taken some big shots.
Yeah, well, Andy Reid, if you're seeing it, Andy Reid's seeing it. And he's going to try to adjust that as much as he can, although sometimes these guys, you can curb their style only so much, and then they don't stay the same quarterback. So that madcap is a little bit about Mahomes. But you're right. That would change the dynamic. And we talked about the backup quarterbacks around the league a moment ago. But if it happened to be in Kansas City, it would fundamentally change that team for the worse. So you're right. That's something we got to watch.
For outstanding information and special offerings and promotions, we invite you and encourage you to sign up for our newsletter today simply by going to the website at betmaker.com. The second half of the Bills-Bengals game, I believe, changed the number here to the point where we're looking at New England 7.5. Buffalo was stepping on Cincinnati's neck. They're up 14-0. They're going in for another score. TJ Yeldon fumbles at the 8-yard line. Still 14-0. They're in complete control. And Josh Allen, as good as he'd been, makes an unforgivable throw across his body, turns into a pick. Bengals score. All of a sudden, it was like, what just happened? The Bills had a punch to the gut. Bengals roar all the way back and get the lead. To Josh Allen's credit, and this is actually a really good thing for this kid. In 14 career starts, he has 5 fourth-quarter comebacks for wins. Everybody shoots holes at the guy. He made a bonehead play, and it completely altered that game. But then he went down and won the game. But that was so clearly in the second half of that game, and it was warned all week. They started looking ahead to New England. New England hasn't played anybody, and New England's phenomenal. We get it. But Edelman's banged up. Gordon's banged up. The Antonio Brown soap opera is over. And it's Brady against this Bills defense that gave him big fits in 2 games last year.
Yeah, that's why I think that the number that jumps at me is the total here probably. I think this is a defensive game because you're right. The Bills the Bills were tough last year on Brady. They unnerved him some, and the games were both under last year. So I would expect that to happen, especially up in Orchard Park. What the concern from Buffalo's angle is, yeah, I know Miami's played the Jets and Dolphins here, but you go back.
Well, Buffalo's played nobody either.
Right. But that the New England's defensive numbers are a little bit skewed, what I'm saying. But even before that, I mean, the opener, remember, Big Ben was still there with Pittsburgh in the opener, and the Steelers couldn't do anything in that opening game. And then go back to the Super Bowl. So you got 4 games now, and I'm counting the Super Bowl. The last 4 games, it meant something. New England's defense has not given up a touchdown in those 4 games.
Yep.
The Jets touchdowns, pick 6, and a muff punt yesterday. So I mean, they are playing at such a high level on that defense. And just a note here, the last 31 games in this series, you know this as well as anybody. New England's won 28 of them. And the 2 of the 3 they lost, Brady was not a factor. One was he missed completely a couple of years ago, and then the other was in a Week 16 game where he hardly played. So there's series history here that is really on New England's side. But I think the angle here is, and Buffalo's improved, but the under is the angle here, like you said.
Yeah.
Because both these teams play lights out defense.
New England's defense is spectacular. You're spotted. The one difference, and I keep coming back to it, Bruce, and specific to this series where Brady has owned them, but throughout the course of the majority of that series, the guy that always killed the Bills was Gronkowski, and he's not there. But in fact, Buffalo won that game against the Bengals yesterday, saved their season because they can lose this game. Nobody thinks they're winning the AFC East. But being 3-1 is a lot different than 2-2. And the number's ridiculous, Bruce. Just like teams that are 87% of the time 0-2 miss the playoffs, teams that are 3-0, 77% of them make the playoffs. So yeah, we'll see how it all stacks up. But it's actually the game. I think you got to call it the game of the week with what's at stake. Whether Buffalo can perform on the big stage remains to be seen.
I think they're thrilled with Josh Allen's progress, too. I am as well. I love this kid at Wyoming. Like I've said many times, if he looked good running that offense they run at Wyoming, just wait till he gets in the NFL. And heck, he's playing like he's as comfy as he's playing against New Mexico. I mean, not much difference for him. He's just going out doing his thing. So
I don't want to make this a Bills thing. I mean, but very quickly, he really does have. And it's what that organization has been starved for a long, long time. He really has a Jim Kelly mentality. He really does. I'll never forget. It was a Monday night game, and Jim Kelly, in their heyday, Jim Kelly threw 4 first-half interceptions against Cincinnati, and you would think you'd be terrified to go back and throw. He came out in the second half. I think he threw 5 touchdowns. And Allen's kind of like that. He'll do one of the stupidest things you've ever seen in your life, and then he puts it away like it never happened. It's very early in his career. But that's another discussion. I've said this, and I believe it, but time will be the judge. But when all is said and done, Baker Mayfield today, Josh Allen today, and Mayfield gets all the hype. I sincerely believe this. Talk to me in 8-9 years. I think Josh Allen's the better quarterback.
Well, he might be. And for me, being a longtime Denver fan, another mistake by John Elway. He just couldn't be bothered with Josh Allen last year. He didn't think he was the quarterback, even though people in the front range there thought, look, this kid's in Wyoming. We've seen him. We know him. We'd love to be cheering for him here at Mile High. But no, actually, that's an endorsement for Josh Allen, the fact Elway overlooked him. So that's sort of the pattern in Denver these days, but that's what's going on with the Broncos.
All right, I'm going to go off the board a little bit. I got 2 games here. Tennessee, Atlanta laying 4. Jacksonville at Denver. Denver's laying 3. I can't trust any one of those 4. The only one marginally I can trust is Atlanta's good at home. That's the only thing, but Tennessee 1 week to the next, you don't know what you're going to get.
Oh, you don't? Yeah. And you talk about a team that needed, I think, an extra few days. Tennessee played on Thursday and got kind of beaten up at Jacksonville. It's the Titans. I mean, Marcus Mariota was sacked 9 times in that game. He looked like Tex Cobb at the end of the 82 fight against Holmes. I've never seen him get much since then. But that's part of the problem there with Tennessee. I mean, they really have to figure out. And this is Mariota's contract year, but I think it works better for them. This is a better matchup probably than Jacksonville was, because they can probably get Derrick Henry. They have a better chance to get him moving. And I think that's where this whole offense revolves around. If they can establish Henry on the ground, and they really couldn't do that against Jacksonville, makes things a lot easier. And Atlanta has been yielding at times against the run. So you can make a case for Tennessee on that basis, I think, plus the bounce back. from the really bad effort on Thursday. And the other game, if you want to take Denver, make a case for Denver, boy, be my guest, because I can't make it now. This offense, again, here's John Elway again, another change at quarterback. Joe Flacco ain't doing it. This team is scoring barely 15 points per game. He is no upgrade from Case Keenum. And I think the greatest shock this year is we're finding out Vic Fangio maybe wasn't ready to be a head coach, even though they all love him in Denver. He's not taking enough chances. And aside from that, going for the 2 against the Bears at the end of the game, but it's just in the regular play calling. They're not blitzing. They don't have 1 sack in 3 weeks, Brian. And if you told me before the season that any defense with Von Miller and Bradley Chubb would go 3 weeks into the season without 1 single sack with the supposed defensive mastermind calling the shots, something's wrong. And this is John Elway has driven this thing off a cliff, and there is nobody above him in Denver to take the steering wheel because of that ownership situation. It's bad, and Minshew's the guy. I think Minshew's the best quarterback out of this class, and Foles ain't going to get his job back. There's my prediction. Jacksonville wins this one.
Tell me about this one, Bruce. Seattle's laying 4, total 47 at Arizona. Road favorite in a division game. I would just say the subplot here, I think the worst thing in the world that happened to Arizona is Seattle's coming off a loss. New Orleans punched them in the mouth. Russell Wilson was still spectacular in defeat. I think Seattle coming off a loss. And Carroll, I think, I don't know those numbers, and honestly, forgive me, that would be one to look up, but I would venture a guess, a pretty healthy guess, that both USC and Seattle, at Pete Carroll's numbers off a loss are probably pretty good. I could see Seattle coming in and taking these guys to the woodshed.
Yeah, I could see it too. And they are good off a loss. They've been good. I want to say 6-1 the last 7 in Seattle, and then I'll go back a bit further. But it's that's pretty good angle with Carroll. I think we saw Seattle this week, and we saw it last year too. The top tier teams. Well, I mean, there's a reason top tier teams, they win a lot of games, but Seattle really has a lot more trouble, like most teams. But I'm not sure they're really an elite team anymore. They can handle teams at this level. And we saw yesterday that the Saints really bossing that game around just up front. They were just tougher than Seattle, and there's only so much Russell Wilson can do. But that stuff starts to work against teams like Arizona. The Cardinals have some defensive issues still, and actually, this offense it's going to be a work in progress all season. And Kyler Murray yesterday, they took away all the deep stuff. It was just dink, dink, dink. And I mean, Christian Kirk caught 10 passes yesterday for 59 yards. So everything's just, in front, and that makes it hard to navigate downfield when you got to go 3 yards at a time, especially when you're throwing. I think Seattle gets them here. That was a game we liked. We had Seattle next week over the Cardinals.
God bless him. He's a Hall of Famer, and there's no doubt about that. But boy, you go the last 6, 7, 8 years, what kind of numbers would Larry Fitzgerald have put up if he was on a good team?
Yeah, or if he had this offense a few years ago, although a lot of 4-year, 5-yard catches. But yeah, you're right. It's credit to him. He's going to play his whole career out down there. He likes living there and all that. You don't see that too often these days in the NFL. But good for him for sticking it out all the way with the Cardinals.
Bruce, Jacksonville's at Denver. Denver's laying 3, totals 38. Lou Saban, John Ralston, Floyd Little, they're not going to be there. Good sections are still available for this one.
Yeah, and boy, they're the award drums are beating in Denver, and it's more John Elway now, and they're thinking, well, maybe it wasn't. They're joking in Denver that Case Keenum and Vance Joseph are texting each other now and was sending like laughing emojis to each other, and like, wow, they blamed us for this. Yeah, it's a mess. I tell you, the storyline we talk about, young quarterbacks here. Minshew has been as impressive as any of them, and there is something about this kid, and we saw this last year at Washington State, where the team rallies around him. He exudes such confidence like that. Not every quarterback does that. You can just tell around the league the guys that don't. This guy is off the charts with that. The confidence is exuding, and that has changed the dynamic here. I was kind of anti-Jacksonville coming into the year. This kid is making me change my mind, and it's just. There's the talent there. I mean, apparently Jalen Ramsey doesn't want to leave now. All of a sudden he's joining back in the party. So maybe Jacksonville turns things around. And if Denver doesn't win one of these weeks, I'm not sure when the week's going to come. This season is already almost slipping away from them. The only thing in Denver's favor is the rest of the West, save Kansas City, is also struggling. So maybe they could still get back and pull themselves back into the wild card race, but it better start this week. I think it's a remote chance, and Jacksonville, I think, is the side to take.
Sunday night game, you hope it's a dandy, and it's Dallas laying 3, total 46 at New Orleans. Obviously, Drew Brees is not there, but this Saints team, hey, Bruce, I'll tell you what was kind of hidden and forgotten. They went up there, get the win at Seattle, stayed on the West Coast. By the way, mark that one down whenever you find out. Niners didn't go home, walked in, pummeled the Bengals. New Orleans didn't go home. There's that bonding thing and all the questions that were there. They went in and punched him in the mouth. But this New Orleans, you never thought you'd say this. It's the New Orleans defense. If they had not had the defensive touchdown taken away in the Rams game, believe me, they were in that game. And this Saints defense went up there and won another one.
Yeah, and the end scoreline there is deceiving because Seattle scored a couple of times late and once on the very last play of the game when the
hopeless.
Saints were really trying. Yeah, the Saints were really trying. But no, the defense played well. I thought of all the efforts yesterday, Brian, that might have been the most impressive I saw was New Orleans going up there. And really, I mean, the final scoreline doesn't reflect it, but they took Seattle to the woodshed. And Teddy Bridgewater looked a lot more comfy. There's the difference between a guy, he gets all the first string reps all week at quarterback, as opposed to backup reps. And when you threw him into the deep end of the pool against the Rams the previous week, and that was pretty tough. Well, you give him a full week to run the first string offense, and Bridgewater looked a lot more comfy yesterday. And he's got weapons. Kamara is great, and that Saint defense is very underrated. That I thought was the most impressive game yesterday, and this represents a much tougher test for Dallas. You talk about a team that has had the schedule break well for it in the first 3 weeks. Dallas, they caught the Giants before the Daniel Jones revolution. They caught the Redskins, and they caught Miami. The season really starts this week for the Cowboys. I'm not sure they're going to be up to it. And remember, the Saints thought they thought a game was stolen from them last year in Dallas late in the season. They'll be very fired up to avenge that 13-10 loss.
No, I'm with you, bud. And I'm real quick taking a peek. How about this one, Bruce? Heading into week 4, we said before the game last week, Pittsburgh's in trouble. The Saints, based on where they reside, could tread water and odds are still win their division. And they go and win in Seattle. Who knows what happens here? But come down the road when Brees comes back. What do you think of this bet today? The Saints to win the Super Bowl at 16-1. I mean, now there's the overlay of all overlays because I think they'll be in the playoffs.
I do too. I think that's a great price. And I think Sean Payton, right? First of all, that division is, unless Kyle Allen turns into a savior at Carolina, the division's got some problems. And second, I mean, the Saints they're 2-1 right now. I mean, and so that's fine. Schedule's been tough, and they've been without Brees these last 2 games. I think Sean Payton would settle for being 4-4 when they expect Brees to come back at midseason. He'd take that right now, but that might be selling these guys short. They may be better than that. And I think before the season, the Saints Super Bowl price was a lot lower than that. Less value. You're getting more value now, and I don't think in the end game anything has changed there with the Saints, except if they do drop a few games here, it may hurt the home field thing. But you're right. It's a worthwhile. This is when you jump in on this.
Yeah, I mean it's worth considering. But look, they get the Cowboys, but then they host the Bucks at the Jags. That'll be the very low scoring game. At the Bears will probably be a low scoring game, but. We're thinking if they go 3-3, whatever during Brees' absence, the way they started here now, I think 4-2 is a realistic possibility.
I do too. Yeah, I mean, they think they can win all these games, but I think Peyton would be if they're at 4-4 at midseason, that would be okay. If they're anything worse than that, they got to worry a bit, but that would be okay. But I think they can be better than that. I think they could be 5-3 or even 6-2, because, like you said, it's not just Brees. It's the defense is much improved, and they won some games with the defense last year too. So this is a solid team, top to bottom.
And finally, the thing that watch is the drop-off of what Monday Night Football was and what Monday Night Football is. That even if on paper before the season they thought maybe this is a decent Monday night game, Cincinnati and Pittsburgh 0-3 each.
Yeah, I know. I was looking at that doing the new gold sheet. Yeah, this wasn't what they were thinking. Of course, everything in Big Ben was in there. Now, there is one thing. This has been the nastiest series in the NFL the last few years. I mean, there have been cheap shots and severe injuries and things. So, but this is more like a game you put on Thursday night and not a Monday night game, at least in years past. But yeah, Pittsburgh, the dynamics are changed. Curious though, Mason Rudolph made some plays yesterday. He's not Big Ben, but the season is almost is kind of slipping away from both these teams right now. And I'm not sure Pittsburgh can rally, and Cincinnati. But the Bengals could easily be 2-1 right now, Brian. They haven't played all that bad, especially their 2 games on the road. Very quietly, since he's covered 6 of its last 7 games since late last season. So getting over a field goal here, you can make a case for the Bengals. It may end up being a good game, but yeah, you're right. It's not the marquee event that ESPN envisioned.
No. And finally, Bruce, because we're always in look-ahead mode, we have 2 teams on buys in week 4. It's crazy. For both teams, not both teams. For the Jets, it's a great thing. With Darnold and the problems they've had. Probably a really good thing for the Jets. Niners are 3-0. The last thing they want to do is stop playing. But beyond that, I would just say, look 2 weeks down the road, all the hype, all the Cleveland hype, okay? And they're sitting here 1-2, have to play at the Ravens, and then have to go and play at the Niners, who will be coming off a bye. All the Browns hype. There's a real, and then listen to the Browns schedule coming up. You got at the Ravens, at the Niners off a bye, they host the Seahawks, and then they're at the Patriots. This is a team could be 1-5.
Oh yeah, I mean it's a tough road here for the Browns, and this game on Sunday coming up against the Ravens is really, I think, sort of the pivotal game for the rest of their season. They've got to straighten this out because the schedule gets no easier. They've got a chance though. They were in that Ram game last night, so they've played better the last 2 weeks. But still, all that hype. You have to wonder if it was a little bit misplaced.
He's our good friend, Bruce Marshall from the Gold Sheet, looking behind, looking ahead. We're rolling right along. Hard to believe we're already talking about week 4 in the NFL.
Betmaker, let's make some money tonight.
Well, that's the Betmaker Show for now. We publish multiple times each week. We'd like to thank you for listening. And if you liked what you heard, please take a moment to leave a rating and review, or subscribe to our show feed, or share our show with a friend or two and help us grow the show. We very much appreciate it. Visit us on the web at betmaker.com. And reminder to sign up for the newsletter. Thanks to our engineer, Darren Vandermolen, and producer, Mike Gallivan. The Betmaker Show is a production of Cardinal Marketing Incorporated. Betmaker is a registered trademark. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this content without the express written consent of Cardinal Marketing Incorporated is strictly prohibited.
The handicapping and sports odds information contained on this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Please confirm the wagering regulations in your jurisdiction, as they vary from state to state, province to province, and country to country. Using this information to contravene any law or statute is prohibited. The podcast is not associated with, nor is it endorsed by any professional or collegiate league, association, or team. This podcast does not target and is not intended for an audience under the age of 18. If you think that you have a gambling addiction, stop this podcast now and please seek help.
Gambling and betting on sports is a form of entertainment and should be about having a good time. But when done excessively, it may negatively affect other areas of a person's life, such as their physical and mental health, school or work performance, finances, and or interpersonal relationships. At Betmaker.com and The Betmaker Show, we're concerned about the addiction that gambling may cause, and for this reason, we encourage everyone to practice responsible gambling. An approach to gambling that helps you ensure that it remains an enjoyable activity. Here are the main principles of responsible gambling. Don't think of gambling as a way to make money. Always gamble with money that you can afford to lose. Set limits and stick to them. Never chase losses. Don't gamble when you're depressed or upset, and create a healthy balance. Always be aware of how much time you spend gambling or thinking about gambling. And do not allow gambling to cause you to miss out on time with family and friends or time spent on other activities you enjoy. By following these guidelines, gambling can be a good time and great entertainment. If you feel at any time that your gambling is taking away from important areas of your life, is causing you stress or depression, or is leading to financial losses that are beyond your control, please reach out for help. Learn more at responsiblegambling.org.